So thank you all for showing up. I do appreciate it. This is the annual GMA Safety and Liability Grant Overview webinar. My name is Dan Beck. I'm the director of LGRMS. And within this particular webinar, we're just going to, talk about some of the requirements. Nothing much new for 2025. I'm hoping to make some changes for 2026, but that did not occur. So you're all lucky. It's going to be very similar to what we've had in the past. As in all webinars, we will record this webinar and we will send a link to everybody that registered. So if you weren't able to make it, you can watch it, or you can send it to your friends and have a viewing party at home on Friday night. I've heard it's a great way to spend Friday night. With that said, let's talk about, again, we're just going to talk about grant requirements and then really do a quick overview of the safety plan, action planning and loss analysis. I have another video link that I'll send you that kind of talks about that. We'll do much more detail, but we'll just go over kind of a brief overview. Just talk about some of the grant results over the years. We've given close to over $6 million in grants since I've been here. So lots of money available. So if you have money available, it's really, really critical that you take advantage of that. And, I think sadly to say, we had a lot of people that didn't take advantage of it last year. We're going through, I think there was administrative changes last year, not in the process, but who was doing that. And they were holding people accountable, and I really did appreciate it. The expectation is you're going to follow this, and that the expectation of the person that's going to be managing it is they're going to look at this stuff and they're going to give you feedback, and if you're not meeting expectations. So will applaud that person. So participants eligibility, must be current in all payment contributions. We will check that. Participation by any member employee in at least one LGRMS sponsored training program within the past year of the grant. Again, the premise behind this, we do a lot of regional training. It's actually, especially with inflation, it's extremely expensive, and we want our members to take advantage of this valuable training. And so we're trying to encourage you or member employees for attending. So it doesn't have to be you, it can be any member employee. And what we really suggest that you do is go to lgrms.com and go to the training event calendar, click on that link and look at any upcoming training. So if you have any issues finding that, you can contact me or ask your field rep. They'll be happy to help you out. But look at that. Right now, I think we have most of our spring and mid-year training up. We will be scheduling fall training, but get that on your calendar right now. Get that completed, identifying something, put that on your to-do list, because that's typically one of the issues that prevents people from getting this particular grant. If you're not able to attend, or somebody in your area is not, or it's not convenient, or you don't find any of the topics valuable to you or your staff, you can always take a 3.5-hour crisis coordinator program. This program is really designed for all of you city members and any member that would be receiving a grant to really help identify when a crisis occurs and to know what to do after that. We have a very extensive program. The crisis risk group has done a really good job of developing this training. So we'd really encourage you to take it regardless. We'd like to see every member of GMA insurance pools have a crisis coordinator. We'd like to see for larger members, specifically for those members with police departments, have one person trained in the overall city, but have one person within law enforcement trained. That's where the variety of crises occur, are within law enforcement. That's where they have the biggest risk. So we would like to have somebody trained there to help at least identify those and know kind of what to do in case of those situations. If applicable, current in response to recommendations. So the field reps, the risk control folks, the law enforcement folks, if they come out and make a recommendation, we'd like to see those things responded to within 30 days. Now, or not 30 days, 90 days. Now, do you have to complete all the recommendations? No, but you should respond with a plan of how you're going to complete those. Some of the recommendations we make might be quite extensive, and they might take multiple years to get capital approved to do those things. The expectation is not that you're going to complete them, but that you'll begin working on the completion of those particular items. Have a designation of a specific person as a member of the safety coordinator or new member of the law enforcement risk specialist. So you can have either or. I would highly recommend you have both. If you're both, again, the safety coordinator is something that's been in existence for many years. I think one of the problems with the safety coordinator program is that people would identify people that don't necessarily have the right skills or resources to be successful in that particular role. We want somebody that's a leader, that can really encourage people to get things done, influence people outside of their own department. So if you nominate the person that's running the backhoe in your public works group, that person might not meet that role. They might, but they might not. But we also have developed last year, the year before, the Law Enforcement Risk Specialist Program, or as we call them, LGRMS, folks. And this is really designed to help improve, improve risk reduction within law enforcement specifically. So there's a training associated with both of those. The LGRMS program is a 6-hour training, and we provide that multiple times a year around the state annually. And then the same thing is true within the safety coordinator. And you can find both of those trainings availability at LGRMS.com on our training event page. Participants' eligibility. Again, in order to be eligible, you must have the following criteria. Show proof of a written policy on holding safety meetings and training. Again, the expectation is at a minimum of once per quarter, you're going to have safety meetings. You're going to have those documented. They're going to talk about the people that were attending, the safety topics that were provided. We really want to see how you're distributing information, safety-related information to your employees. And it should be for every department you have within your particular organization. So if you have law enforcement, if you have fire, if you have public works, if you have administration, all those people should have some level of training on a periodic basis, and that should be documented, and that's kind of the expectation. The written policy associated with this is not something that has to be big. We can send you policy language that states that, but you do have to have a policy. Show proof of a written policy or written requiring a minimum of 2 safety inspections per year. Again, we have that sample written policy, but the issue is conducting those inspections. And it can be as simple as twice a year, you have somebody go out and look at all your buildings and look at your things, and that would meet the expectations. But what I would really suggest, as part of your safety committee or part of some other team, assign this within that team. Assign maybe people to do inspections of their own buildings. Assign people potentially to do inspections of buildings outside of their own ownership. So they're able to see other things. They might have fresher eyes. Working with that team to help develop checklists that really focus on things that are causing injury, slips and falls, housekeeping, other related things. Also putting in there things, if you've had injury related to a specific thing, maybe they're looking at those things when they're out checking that to see if they're still continuing, to make sure we have a process in place. So let's see. Somebody had asked, Kenneth has asked, does the LGMS driver training count? We put the whole city through it. So are you talking about the DDC training, Kenneth? And then once someone completes the safety coordinator 1, 2, and 3 module, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's a great question. So the 4-hour driver course, yeah, Kenneth, if we're providing that training on site within the year, then it counts for your regional training. So that's a great question. Thank you, Kenneth. And Lori, your question about safety coordinator 1, 2, and 3. Yes, the expectation is for that safety coordinator that they're supposed to have safety coordinator 1, 2, and 3 question. And I really appreciate you asking this question so I can expand on that. The expectation is that if you're a newly appointed safety coordinator, you only have to take one safety coordinator training each year for the first 3 years. And then once you've completed safety coordinator 1, 2, and 3, you don't have to have any more training to meet that expectation. We are in the process of looking at revamping our training a little bit to make it a little bit more specific to the role of the safety coordinator. We're actually looking at reworking safety coordinator in general, what the meaning, what the role is, what the expectations are. But we're going to customize that training. But we're also looking at having at least one safety coordinator 4, or whatever we choose to call it, as the hot topics. So if you're looking to go to a training each year, we'll have a hot topics training that'll go through some of the new risks that we might see, or trends or processes that we'd like you to take on. So great questions. Thank you so much for your interactivity. Show proof of safety meeting trainings policy, which we kind of talked about within that. Again, we want to see the proof of both of those things. The policy is pretty easy. We can give you a sample policy. You put that in your city policy log, have that approved by the mayor and city council. You're good to go. But the proof is really the issue but we want to see that proof. Show proof. There is a written mandatory seatbelt policy. So again, once you've done this, you're good, but we want to make sure you have a seatbelt policy. And we really want to know how it's distributed. So you don't have to say that it's distributed, or show us proof that it's distributed. You can put it, hey, it's in the employee handbook and everybody gets it, or we send it in via letter to everybody. All these things, especially the seatbelt policy, having the seatbelt policy to meet the goal is one thing, or meet the requirements is one thing. Requiring people to wear seatbelts is a very, very, very important thing. We have a number of people that suffer fatalities because they are in motor vehicle incidents. And if they were wearing a seatbelt, it would have prevented that particular incident. So it's important to not only have the policy, but to reinforce that. So, from my perspective, this is not part of the requirement, so we're not going to be checking this. But if you have a seatbelt policy, you should be at least providing some level of training to your employees on an annual basis regarding that requirement, along with other things that you consider critical. What is training, though? Is that saying you shall wear a seatbelt? No, it's really talking about why is it important? What's the consequences of failing to do that? Why is it important to the city? Why is it important to the employee? And really the consequences of failing to follow the seatbelt policy, and then holding people accountable for failing to follow that. The last bullet point on this page, only those members with premiums over $100,000. So I can tell you who has what. You can ask me. But if you don't have a premium over $100,000, this does not require you. But the expectation is for those larger members, those people with large employee populations, you're going to be required to not only look at and review your loss analysis, but also to complete a safety action plan based on this, based on that loss analysis. Again, I'd highly request this for everybody. But trends and other things, For smaller members, you might not have a lot of incidents, but there's always things we can help you focus in on. I'd suggest you do this, but it's a requirement for any member with a premium over $100,000. Yes, I think a refresher course would be great. Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate that. So again, when we determine grant levels, it's really by the premium that you pay. So any premiums over $200,000, you're going to get the full amount of $10,000. Again, between $60,000 and $200,000, you get 5% of premium. Premiums between $6,000 and $60,000, you get a flat $3,000. Premiums between $1,000 and $6,000, you get 50% of what you paid in, which is probably really not a bad deal when you think about it. And then premiums less than $1,000, you get $500. So just to let you know, we used to have, again, this is multiple years ago when I first started, that it was a flat $6,000. And anybody that joined the program on work comp or property and liability would be eligible to get $6,000. So we had people paying $1,000 in premium and getting $6,000 in grant money. And from my perspective, that did not seem fair or adequate. So we made these adjustments. This is just examples of how you would do this. And if you're looking to know how much you will get within grant, you can send me an application or an email. I don't have the numbers for 2025 yet, but they're going to be probably pretty consistent what they were for 2024. And I will tell you what those grant numbers are within your approval email. So when you're requesting items, you know, you could, even if you've been approved for a lower amount of items, you can add up to your maximum amount, and we highly encourage you to do that. Again, in this particular case, you just talk to somebody that is, or a city that's paying $330,000 in GRMA premiums and $143,000 in work comp. They would be eligible for $10,000 in GRMA and then $7,200 or $7,200 in workers' compensation, again, based on those formulas. The city of Partytown pays $15,000 in GRMA and $3,600 in workers' compensation. They'd be eligible for $3,000 GRMA, but only $1,800 in work comp. And the city of Cleanville, again, pays $94,000 in GRMA, $58,000 in work comp, but be eligible for $47,000 in GRMA grants and $3,000 in workers' compensation. So again, if you need assistance knowing what you're paying, let me know. I'll be happy to help you out, but that's how the formulas work. Again, the program guidelines continued. The GRMA grant will also reimburse up to 25% of IT in a box. We do a couple other programs like this, but it's really only limited to 5 years. So if you've had IT in a box for 5 years, or the other thing that's replacing IT in a box, I think we will only pay for that for 5 years or reimburse you for 5 years at 25%. If you've been in it for 5 years, you still like it, then probably don't need the 25% to encourage you to continue. Continue on the guidelines, a documented mandatory use guideline or SOP. So the expectation is for unique items or items that are highly safety related, we're going to expect a SOP. So for example, if you get a trenching box, we would like to see your trench policy or program. Why do we want to see that? We want to see it because we want to make sure you have the appropriate program, that you're training appropriately, that when you're going to use that program. Just because you have a trench box, it might just sit around. We want to make sure that you're using it and people are getting trained properly. The same thing with SCBAs or confined space equipment, body armor, body cameras, anything to that effect. Grant funds will be distributed on a first come, first served basis. You know, this is important, but it's really not that important because we have not run out of money. Our grant funds are so well funded that we have not spent all of them in several years. I used to have to go back to the board and ask for additional funding, but they raised them on a permanent basis, so that's no longer the case. The purchase must be made within the calendar year of 2025. So you got to make the purchases, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The review of the 2024, it should be 2025 grant application, will begin on February 1st. So again, we haven't had any applications yet, and I know this is a little late in regards to this, but we've had some administrative changes, so trying to get things in order. But you can send in your application anytime, and actually would highly suggest you get to work on this as quickly as you can so that we can get you an approval and we can get you, you can purchase those things and you can get us proof of purchase. We're always encouraging people to get that information to us. If you get it to us too late, we do not have the ability to provide you reimbursements. Please avoid submitting multiple grant applications. Again, one grant application per member. One of the reasons we want the city administrator or city manager or top in charge person to sign that document is to ensure there's no conflict. We don't want the fire department sending an application and the police department to send in an application. We want everybody to send that in at the same time, the entire city, and then we'll approve those items, and then you can select who's going to get what. The grant request must be signed by the mayor or top executive. That's really the premise behind that. We don't want multiple applications, and that's the rule that will help prevent that from happening. Procedures to request grant money. Again, determine if there's a need fit. We really want to make sure you're getting things that are going to help you reduce risks within your city. So think about that first. Determine all requirements have been met. So you'll go through that checklist within the brochure. That'll help you there. Complete your application. You know, don't worry about perfection. Do the best job you can in completing it. If we find an issue, we're going to let you know. We're going to work with you to get that thing complete. We want to give out the money. We want you to be successful in this. And again, we will provide feedback to let you know if you're missing something. Gather the necessary documentation, as we talked about previously. Submit the completed application along with documentation. This is the one thing that's changed from year to year. So LGRMS no longer has an office within Norcross, Georgia. We are now having everything meld to the GMA offices, and then we'd like you to continue to scan and email those to the LGRMS admin. Based on some turnover, we'll just keep on going there, and they will check that particular email folder. Wait to receive a confirmation, denial, or request for additional information. If you don't receive confirmation within 2 weeks, please let me know. Just let me know. Keep on sending me. The more emails you send me, hey, have we got this? Where are we at in regards to this? Help us help you. If you have questions, let me know. Pick up the phone. But email is a really good way to get a hold of me, and or the LGRMSadmin.com. And you can copy me on any of those, and I'll help respond. Grant funds will be released upon final receipt of paid invoices. I need those paid invoices to be able to send you your reimbursement check. If additional information is requested, gather the information and return it to LGRMS. Pretty self-explanatory. So again, this is really just regarding the process, and I'm not going to read through it, but people constantly ask me if something's going to be approved. I can't really tell you if something is going to be approved or not. I can tell you more than likely it will be, or we've approved it in the past, but ultimately these items are reviewed and approved by other people than me through GMA, and they will have to put their input. Now, again, I'll say to you before submitting an item, you know, you can run it by me, but I'll just say, hey, more than likely this is going to be approved or not. I can't say for certain it will be, and we'll talk about the way you should go about that process. A timeline, again, it typically takes, if you have every duck in a row and you get everything to us, we'll get you that information and approval back within 3 months. But if you send in your application, it's missing a bunch of things, and we wait a couple months for that, and then we get you an approval, and then you have to continue to go back to purchase items, and it takes a long time. It could take 6-8 months or never, based on your response. So your activity really drives this particular process. This is the application page. Again, hasn't changed much, but it's kind of critical that you fill this out. Again, if you look at the first thing is the important instructions, and I'm going to read this. Please complete only one application per member. Applications can include both GMA and workers' compensation items. Please use your computer keyboard to accurately input all data requested below. All communications will be conducted via email. Data clarity and accuracy is critical to swift approval of grants. Incomplete applications may be sent back for completion. Click on the blue square at the bottom and it'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But constantly people are sending me applications and you can't read contact information or email information. So typing it is really critical, because you want to be able to communicate to not just you, but other elected officials and the city manager and anybody else that's a key contact on that. So make sure you're typing that information. If you can't type it, if you don't have availability, just use big print so we can see it, and make sure it's very legible. Again, we want to know the town or city, the date of the application. Make sure you're using the name of the mayor or highest elected official, the title, and their email address, and so on and so on. Again, the designated safety coordinator, we want to know who that is, because this is going to be part of the verification process. And to help you out, tell us when you attended, when that person attended. Safety coordinator 1 and safety coordinator 2 and safety coordinator 3. Put their name and contact information. Again, here's the other, basically the same or another instructions. Please complete the Excel template provided for all requested grant items, and that'll be in part of your application. I'll send that out. Please have your mayor or top administrator, executive director print and sign their name below. Again, the premise behind this is to ensure there's only one application and there's no fighting between the departmental children. The checklist is pretty self-explanatory. We've already talked about that, but it goes through all those different things. I'm not going to go through this one by one. There are some things in here. If you've submitted the safety meeting policy the previous year or previously, you don't need to resubmit that, but you do need to resubmit a documented, completed inspections and the proof or the proof of meeting thing. Again, this is a little outdated. Courtney Stepner is no longer with us, but you can send everything via email electronically to LGRMS admin@lgrms.com. Click on this button to request a reimbursement Excel template, and that will automatically be sent to you. There's a link there. If you need it, you can request it from me, but that link should get you there with an electronic version. This is a copy of the items requested for reimbursement. Pretty simple to fill out. Again, basically the same thing as the other one. We do want to make sure that your city name and the date of the application. Who's really the key contact? Because if we have any questions in the item, you might, again, we're going to talk about that in the next page, but let's say that you put something we've really never seen before. We might pick up the phone and give you a call and say, hey, what's this? What is this going to be used for? Or give me more explanation. This is, again, the way we'd like to see it. So you don't have to put brand names. You can just put very generic things like body camera, body armor, road barriers and signs saying. And then we want a simple explanation of what it's going to do. And some of these things are pretty obvious. Body armor, we kind of know. But again, we'd like you to put down something. And then you don't have to have the exact cost. We don't care about the exact cost, except when it comes to the invoices or the proof of purchase documentation. What do you think it's going to be? Estimate it. And what we really suggest you do is you pile this up with things, bigger things, not small things, bigger items, things on your wish list. So if you got if you're approved for $10,000, or let's say you're approved for $3,000, it's okay to put $10,000 worth of items on there. Once we've approved those items, then you can purchase up to your grant amount, whatever that amount is. Again, this is just basically some description of workers' compensation, approved items. I'm not going to read for that, but the basic question is, you should be asking, can the item requested reduce the risk of injury or workers' compensation claim? So there's a difference between work comp and GRMA, and some people think that it's kind of the same thing. Work comp is really employee protection, so that's the insurance. So somehow this item needs to be able to, work comp approved item needs to be able to reduce employee injury. So let's say it's confined space equipment, and they'll say, well, we have 3,000 on work comp, 3,000 on GRMA. We want $10,000 worth of confined space equipment. Well, confined space is really only related to employee safety. So you're only going to be approved to up to $3,000 for that particular item, and we'll denote that within your approval letter. This is a list of pre-approved items. This hasn't really changed over the years. I've had this out for a few. Just a detail. Again, it gives you kind of something to think about. You can go outside this list. We highly encourage you to think outside the box. If you have a piece of equipment that isn't on this list, get it. Ask the question, is this good? And put it on your application. Any type of, really encourage big equipment. So anything to help you from an ergonomic perspective, anything to help you from slips and falls, anything to that effect is really, really encouraged, because that's where our workers' compensation claims are coming from. Or if you have police arrest and altercations, so what can you do there? So items for GRMA within property and liability, again, the same, almost the same question, but with a different ending. Can the items requested reduce the risk of property and liability claims? So can it reduce fire? Can it reduce theft? That's a property. Those are property claims. Weather damage. Those are property claims. Can it reduce liability claims? Slips and falls on sidewalks, law enforcement liability, general liability, HR liability. All those things would be liabilities that we'd be looking at, and would highly suggest just ask that question. If it answers in it and it sounds correct, more than likely we're going to approve it. Again, just a bunch of different items. We have items for police and fire and everybody else that we've typically approved. So question from Kenneth, is fire protection gear eligible for both? Great question, Kenneth. It is only eligible under workers' compensation because it is only designed to help protect the employee. It does not provide protection from either liability or from property damage. Thank you for your question. That was a great one again. Ineligible items. The grant will not cover personal protective equipment less than $20 a pair. So we don't want to get into disposable items or just general safety related, disposable gloves, things like that. Disposable respirators. Those are things that your city should be paying for out of their own budget. This is for items that really are needed to help protect things. Again, just some things within that list that I showed you earlier of approved items. These are the things that are not approved. Disposable items, which we talked about the $20 a pair or less. Any type of weapons, so guns, tasers, those are not approved. Staff salary costs, those are not approved. General training requirements for specific positions. We do provide a lot of training reimbursement, safety training, but general training we will not. General equipment for multiple non-safety purposes. So if you have a computer you're just going to need, or a desk that's going to need, that's not going to be approved. Association fees or dues, office ergonomics. And again, I think that's one that's debatable. That's one I think we might be able to work with that, but work with me on that. We can see what we can do for you. These items will not be approved. This is under the GRMA side. So standard street signs and road signs. So it's an expectation. If you have a city, you have roads, you're expected to put those. Those aren't safety equipment. Weapons of any type. In-cloud storage, we're not paying for. Staff salary costs, general training requirements for specific positions, general equipment used for multiple non-safety purposes, disposable equipment, association dues or fees, general construction prohibition unless recommended by LGRMS. So if we come in and we recommend that you need to have a new this or new that from a construction perspective and it's going to cost you, then we will then reimburse that. Jumper cables, emergency lights and sirens for vehicles. That's expected. If you have a police department, you are expected to have that. That's not additional safety equipment. That is a basic requirement. So this is just an example of a feedback email. I will no longer be giving those. They'll probably coming from a new person we called Megan Estes, and she'll be sending it. She'll do an initial review of your grant application, and she'll say, I don't see this or I don't see that, or can you provide that? Just, if you need help with it, let me know. We can get your field rep to help with it, but respond to the emails, get that person what they're looking for. This is an approval email, and as you can see, the first bullet point on this is provide a copy of an invoice for each approved marked item. So if you want to reimburse, you need to have an invoice for it. This isn't necessarily new, but it was new back then. Complete and include proof of purchase reconciliation document. So typically what happens is somebody will request, it'll be 10, 20 different items, and they'll send me 10, 20 different proof of purchase documentation. And there's no organization, and I can't really tell what the totals are on those particular items. So what happens is I have to go back and work really hard, or I come back to the member and say, hey, can you help me with this? So the expectation is that you will send in this proof of purchase reconciliation document, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. Again, there should be sent to the LGRMS, received via email, postmarked before January 15th. Again, January 15th, 2026 will be the date. We want it. We have to get this in to be able to reimburse you for 2025 grant by January 15th the following year. If we don't get it, we can't reimburse it. We don't have the accounting ability. It'll have to go into the following year. The amount of $3,000, so this is the amount. It should match the max grant level, as you can see below. Same thing for this. You were able, so if let's say you put in $200 in this, I want $200. As long as you have that item approved, you can get up to those things within that. You can see that they are approved in work comp or GRMA columns. So as long as those items are approved within the column associated with it, you can use that grant money for that. So for instance, let's say you're approved up to $3,700 in workers' compensation or GRMA. Let's say $3,000 and $3,700, and you had AEDs and you only selected one, and one is $1,500. You can buy as many AEDs you want because they're approved for both work comp and GRMA, and you can buy as many as you get up to that really total of $6,700. Again, another example. This is really an example of the amount that was not, and I'll highlight that in red, and it'll give you the amount, and it'll tell you why. And you might ask, well, why it was? I'll tell you why, but it will, or specifically if you want to know. It'll tell you basically it wasn't a part of the grant process. So here's another question. Do you want just an invoice or a proof of payment? An invoice, a paid invoice is fantastic. If you send that to me, that's all I need. But great question. This is just another example of a $10,000 max amount. Here's an example of the proof of purchase reconciliation document. So for each document you provide to me, I'd like you to number, so if you have an invoices, you have 5 or 6 or 7 invoices, just take out a marker and mark on those 1, circle it, 2, circle it, 3, and that's the order they're to come in. And then you're going to say at the bottom of that, what is the amount that they're going to, that we're going to reimburse you for? And what this will do is it's in an Excel spreadsheet. It'll be sent to you upon approval, and you're going to put that in there. And then when I get to the bottom and I say, hey, this is what I say and this is what you say, and the numbers are different, I'm going to send you an email and say, hey, our numbers are different. If they're both the same, I'm just going to go ahead and request that you get reimbursed. So it just makes things quicker that way. Action plan and loss analysis, for those that you're required and for those that you don't, I have a whole video, and I'll send you the video link of how to do the action planning process. But it's a really valuable process, and we highly recommend it. We want you and your leadership team to really know where your losses are occurring. And if you don't ask for your loss analysis, you don't look at that, you're not going to know. And then what we expect you to do is identify, based on that loss analysis, what departments are those trends occurring? And then within those trended departments, what are the loss trends within that department? And then we ask you to kind of work with those departments to develop that action plan. If it's motor vehicle related, can we do anything? Do we have a policy? Would that help? What's the culture like? Is there training that would help? All those things. And we just look for something to look at that. And there's, again, a whole video that talks about that. I'm not going to go into it now. Here's an example of the loss analysis. It talks about that in that video. It talks about that process there. So again, you can do that by yourself if that's you, but I highly recommend that if you're that large of a member and you're required to do this, work with the department, sit down with the department leader, get a couple people, maybe a frontline leader and a couple employees, and talk to them about the losses. What are you seeing? The loss analysis is one tool that we provide. It doesn't necessarily tell everything it needs to know, and it might have a trend that's really not there. It might have been a one-off, or whatever that might be. We're relying on you to look at that and kind of come together, and maybe even the trend says, hey, this is our issue, but I know this is our biggest risk. Put that biggest risk in there. This is what we're going to focus our attention on now. This is where our issues are. I think you will know your organization, and your department will know your organization much better than we will ever know it. So I highly recommend that you get a team within that department to do it. Make the leader responsible for not only developing that plan, but implementing that plan. Have some periodic reviews with that department. Where are we at in regards to this? Where are we at in regards to this? Ask those questions. Get your leader, get the city manager, city administrator, mayor to help you with driving that performance, asking those questions. Ultimately, that's going to change long-term success. This is an example of a completed program. Sorry for that. As you can see within this, you have police department, public works, kind of talks about percentages here of claims dollars, total incurred. It kind of talks about the top losses. Looks like ergonomics, walking, working surfaces were pretty high. And then you're working with the police department. So their issue was motor vehicle operations at 34%. And for work comp, and 29% for property and liability. So that's where you decided to focus. Again, the action here, the police department, the chief is going to communicate the targets and goals and its status to the department in a monthly meeting. So every month they're going to report on what the plan is, what the goal is, and how they're doing in regards to that. Enhance or develop motor vehicle policy. So we have policies that are available for motor vehicles, but have a policy on whatever that might be. Maybe it's pursuits, but maybe it's just general safety related things. Maybe they need to have an incident investigation process. Maybe they need to have training. Those are all things you can put in this particular plan. Setting clear expectations. No matter what it is, if you do not hold people accountable to meeting expectations, safety and risk expectations, what does that say to your employees? Well, it says, I don't really care. If you're not willing to hold people accountable and have some consequences for failing to follow those expectations, then it really says you're not really that important. Those things aren't really that important to you. So again, from my perspective, the accountability performance chain is set very clear expectations, have a policy, but it should be clear what it's going to be doing. Remove any barriers for successful doing that. So for instance, let's say you have a seatbelt policy and somebody says, yeah, I can't really do that. Seatbelt doesn't fit me, or it doesn't work, or for my job. Answer those questions. Those questions should be answered. If you let those things go without answering or making some accommodation or doing something, then everybody else is going to see that it's not that important. Ensuring employees are capable. Not every employee is capable of doing everything every day. It's the job of the frontline leader to ensure the capability of those employees to do those safety related tasks. Provide quality training. Again, quality training is not telling people they should do this or it's a requirement. Quality training gives them the why. It gives them some background. It motivates people. It gets people educated on why this is so important. Providing feedback. Supervisors, risk managers, other people are responsible providing consistent feedback so that people continue to do that. Just because you provide training and everything else, you can't expect that that's going to work perfectly. The only way that does is if you have supervisors and frontline leaders that are out there looking at things, and when they see an issue, they're providing that quality feedback. And then lastly, if necessary, establishing consequences for failing to follow those expectations. Within the program, you have a leadership. We want the leaders to approve those particular items within the department, and then the overall leadership. So if that's the mayor, if that's the city manager, they need to approve that. Why do we want them engaged in the ownership of those things? We want them to know where their losses are. We want them to be, have some ownership in reducing those losses. And this is the last slide, and I'll open up for any questions. This is the training event calendar. So you just go to lgrms.com, and the training event calendar is here. And as you can see, this is the calendar. This is what it looks like. You can do it by, this is by list. The other one is by month. You can see other, but it'll tell you all the options for training for the upcoming year. Again, this is periodically updated. So we have most of our spring on there. We don't have fall training on there, but that will be coming soon. So again, in order to meet that requirement, this is one of the things that hangs people up. Go and sign yourself up or somebody else for training that's upcoming. Can grant applications be submitted each year for different items? Yes, sir. Yes, they can. You can submit different items. We highly encourage you to submit an application each year for different items. So great question. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, I thank you. Here's another one. Can you use the 2024 application? I don't see. You can. I'm going to be sending. You should have received the 2025 application already. It was distributed, but if you don't, you can send me an email. It's going to be basically the same. There's not many changes other than the address and things. So if you remember the address, you can use that, or email things to lgrmsadmin.com, whatever that address is. Just send me an email. Anybody else have any questions? I thank you all so very much. I really appreciate your time. Again, don't panic. It seems complex, but it's not. We'll help you walk through this, do the best job you can, and we're here to help you. We want you to be successful in obtaining this grant. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.